G'day, mate. This is John Dorney, and you're listening to the Sirens of Audio podcast.
G'day audiophiles, this is the Sirens of Audio. My name is Dwayne, it's great to have your company. Philip's not with me at this second, but he will be in a few seconds' time. Because last week we were speaking with the extremely talented John Dorney about his work with Big Finish, writing, script editing and acting in, and we're going to continue that interview with him right now.
You talk about working with Matt Fitton and things like Doom Coalition. How do you actually go about constructing 16 stories? Because that was nearly all Matt and you that did all that.
Doom Coalition was Ken and David. They basically plotted out the first, the 16 episodes, though with the facility to adjust them accordingly. So I think certain aspects of that, like River Song was a late addition, and I think the ending was going to be a multi-master story, but then the main range did multi-master story as well, which got in the way and things like that. So there was always the room for doing tweaks and changes as you went along. But the general arc of what each box set was going to be, I think, was relatively clear in their minds from early on. And then Ravenous was quite heavy with David. I think David had clear ideas of what he wanted it to be. But then, as I say, you come in and you tell your stories, and he allows everyone to adjust the storylines accordingly. I think by the time we got to Stranded, often with these things, before writing it, we'd sit down and have a general meeting and chat about what we wanted to do, which is usually the writers, the script editors, the producers, sometimes via video link or Skype. There would be some sort of group meeting and some kind of group discussion. So we had a solid idea of what the plots were going to be. And at that point, we'd bring in some of our own ideas and some of our own things and go, well, what about this and what about this? So I remember we definitely had discussions in terms of that with something like, say, Ravenous. We had a lot of that in terms of countermeasures and the robots. Stranded, there was a meeting which was us trying to figure out what we wanted to do with the overall run of that, with Matt largely collating a lot of those discussions in terms of a general arc for where the series was going to go. That was quite early on as well. That was maybe about a year and a half ago or whenever it was. And at those meetings, you kind of have these discussions where you kind of fling things out and make suggestions for other people, and it all begins to blend together. So, I think I might have been even the person who suggested maybe something like Andy being somebody we could use from something else in Stranded. And I've definitely suggested the idea that became the Lumiat for Lisa in the Missy sets. Though obviously she kind of took that and run with it and did her own thing. But certainly, say the initial Stranded meeting, I remember saying, well, what I'd quite like to do is a contemporary historical. That's what I want to do. And then we see whether that fits in, and everyone has the discussions. And then when the storylines come in, I think it was initially going to be the third story, but then we felt it was going to be better in the second place and sort of things like that. Some other things where it can be a bit more sort of script editor led. So something like, say, Star Cops, for example. Andrew Smith has a big book of guidelines going, and this is what happens in episode 1 in quite a degree of detail. And he's script edited me on another thing recently that took a surprising amount of time to get up and ready to record due to COVID, so I can't mention it, but again, that was another one where it was quite a detailed breakdown where he'd got very clear ideas of what his episodes were and slightly less clear ideas of what episodes 2 and 3 were, and that was going to go with someone else and all that. And there was one I did which I plotted out where it was maybe about a 4 or 5 page brief with this is the setup of episode 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so like a 9 episode thing where every episode there was a vague idea, as long as which then people could go away and run with, but you needed to do this and this to make the arc of it work. And that was pretty much entirely me, and just my going, this is what I want the plot of this to be. And it's as variable as that, basically. So sometimes we sit in a meeting and discuss where we want something to go, or sometimes It's the script editor just goes, this is what I want it to be, or the script editor and the producer gauge it together, and so on and so forth.
From Big Finish Productions, Doctor Who, The Eighth Doctor Adventures, Stranded, Volume 1.
She used every ounce of her strength to escape the Crucible. No control, no navigation. Instinct brought her to her second home, Earth. Then she gave up the ghost.
You're saying you own a house?
Oh, this place!
Isn't this Baker Street? Expensive area.
Number 107. I made the investment a long time ago.
Hello? Can I help you?
Yes? What are you doing in my house?
The past few days, everyone's becoming more paranoid that there could be someone or something else in the house.
The idea of spending the rest of my life here.
There are worse places to live than planet Earth.
The TARDIS isn't responding at all.
Well, we knew it'd be difficult.
I really think I might not get her back.
Dr. Liv's been shot!
I thought it was safe here, but we've lived our lives so dangerously for so long that we've forgotten death lurks everywhere. Driving a car, walking the street, working in a shop.
A police box on Camden Road. I'm old enough to remember what this was really used for.
Big Finish. We love stories.
But if we're going to be stuck here a while, we might as well give the walls a lick of paint.
I'm a Time Lord. I don't do up kitchens.
So how far ahead are you working? Do you know what's going to happen after Stranded?
I don't think we're that far ahead at the moment.
Are you planning next? What's happening?
I don't know yet what that is. I think that might come up relatively soon, because I think Stranded is... Well, Stranded 1 and 2 are sort of done and locked, and I think Stranded 3 is potentially, soon. Whether I'm involved with that, I don't know, I should say. But certainly the discussions about Stranded began to happen around about box set 3 of Ravenous. So we were aware of roughly where it was going at that point. I think even like at the initial meeting for Ravenous 3, where we were discussing and planning and figuring out how it happened, we were even discussing like box set 3 and 4 at the same meeting. I think pretty much the first thing David said at the meeting was going, right, okay, I know we're discussing Ravenous 3, but the end of series 4 is going to be these masters, and it's going to be called Day of the Master, and it's a two-parter. Which one of you is free to write it? Which turned out to be me. But yeah, it's variable, basically, is again the answer. So I think we don't think too far ahead in general terms, but by the time you're getting to about story set 3 or 4, if it's like an ongoing series, you begin to be going, well, what do we do next, and what's a contrast? I think that was the main thing with Stranded. I think most of us were going, as long as it isn't Time Lords, we're fine. So what's a nice contrast to that? So yeah, so I think there's always an element of discussion. Now, having said that, some of them, it's a little bit more one box at a time, and we see what happens. So yeah.
Can I ask a question about the robots? I was very excited to have the addition of Toos and Pool in box set 2,
yes.
And I think in the extras, David may have indicated that there are a couple of box sets being recorded close together. So are you able to say whether there might be any further appearances of Toos and Pool?
There are, yes, there are, and
Excellent.
of both of them, yeah. So
Excellent.
for the obvious question of that, so yeah. Again, don't know how much I can say about that, but certainly, yeah, the working on that one was quite an intricate piece of planning, but hopefully it's going to pay off in the final edits for all of them. Yeah.
So how much do you take that kind of thing into consideration with a lot of these original series actors getting older now? Philip and I have talked about Tom Baker recording many years in advance, and obviously because he's of a great age. But any of these actors could pass away due to age-related reasons at any time. Is that something that goes into your planning?
It never really comes up, to be honest. I mean, certainly, like as you know, we've rather tragically discovered with Chadwick Boseman recently. The age doesn't matter, really, and certainly there are there's no way of knowing, and you can't tell, so you can't really plan for it. So you plan for a best case scenario, really. I think, yeah, generally speaking, I think we're happy to record with whoever's happy to record with us for as long as they're happy to record for us. I don't think we plan for anything beyond that, really. Because there are only so many plans you can put in place on the basis of going, well, we've no idea what the future holds, and and I think isn't that whole thing about, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, that thing. I think you might end up future-proofing something that then you don't need to have worried about, really. So I think there was a time when we were on the last series of Tom's that we would have had before the license ran out. And so that's another thing that happens, that people forget there is a license that needs to be renewed, so it's not necessarily eternal. And if anything, I'm that's the thing I think about more, really, than the mortality of actors. And because there are ways and means of dealing with almost anything, basically. And David Collins is probably a good example. It feels, that there are things we'd have done if David had lived that we can't do, which is a shame. But you just do something else instead. It's as simple as that. It's as straightforward as that, really. Yeah.
With the robot series, were you aware you were going to do that when the episode was written for Ravenous, or did that Ravenous episode work so well you went, let's do a box sets?
I to be honest, I'm not 100% sure of how it came about. Really, I am aware that the moment I was aware of the script of Escape from Caldor, I was aware of that was the thing that was going to happen. Yeah. I think so. When I read it, it's been a while, but I remember we were talking about it, and I'm not sure to the degree of where the planning of it came from. Whether it was Matt wrote that ending and then David went, oh, whatever, or whether he put that ending because David had already had the idea. I don't know. It's one of the things I always find. I largely keep out of the things that aren't directly me in a weird way. So I don't read scripts if I don't need to. Which sounds like a strange thing. So it's something like I didn't need to read must-see TV in Stranded 1. In fact, I didn't read David Barnes's for a while, but then I needed that for something else. I needed to read Matt's to know where I was going, but then there's this bit going, I don't particularly gain anything from reading these in advance. I'll just wait and listen to them when they're actually properly put together. So I will basically not listen to things I don't need to listen to until I need to hear them. So and another example is actually, I think is it Whisper? Is that what it was called? Matt's story in Ravenous 4. Didn't read that. Waited to actually hear it in the finished version because I didn't need to. I couldn't change anything in mine because it was Whisper was written after Day of the Master was, I think, even recorded. So there was little point in reading the script other than just going just out of curiosity. But then again, I'd rather hear it as the final thing. So a lot of it, I'm further back in the decision process than people might necessarily think.
One more question about the robots. If you're involved in the planning of it, was there any discussion about how far to separate the Big Finish series from the Magic Bullet series from about 20 years ago now? That was a really, really good audio series, but very connected to that Caldor story.
Well, not for me personally. I mean, in the initial stages, Matt was going to script edit, but then he had to drop out due to having other things going on, and he'd got whole sections in the Bible about the Caldor audios and stuff like that. I'd never heard them, and I think we have slightly different attitudes in terms of the expanded universe. So he would bend over backwards in the wrong Doctors to accommodate business unusual. I wouldn't have bothered. I just ride roughshod. I go, well, somebody will figure it out, or it's a different universe, it's a multiverse or something. Somebody will work that out. I never felt particularly beholden to the Caldor audios. Just by virtue of the fact that they're, people probably aren't going to hear them now, or kind of they aren't going to directly listen. So factoring them in felt like a potentially bad idea. I think we had to kind of do things in our own way and create it separately. And again, that was largely led by what had been in Robophobia and what had been in Escape from Caldor and Sons of Caldor, how they'd done the world. So I was largely running with them rather than being too worried about. And also it's that thing of if you don't listen to them, which I haven't, I kind of made the deliberate choice not to when I was script editing it, then there's no chance that you're actually going to accidentally plagiarise them or do anything like that. I think taking active steps to avoid them is probably, if anything, going to make you more like them than anything. I hear good things though. I always say that with regards to it. Everyone says they're really good, and I will probably listen to them at some point when we've finished.
Well, the focus of those stories is Ivanov, played by Russell Hunter.
Russell Hunter.
Obviously, you can't do anything with him anymore, so that's something you don't have to worry about.
Yeah, but yeah, it didn't come up really. No, we were determined to do our own thing. Or I certainly was. Yeah.
Robots out! There are reports of several robots being destroyed in protest.
From Big Finish Productions, The Robots, Volume 3.
Detonation in 60. The Sons of Kaldor themselves are now claiming responsibility for several recent acts of violence.
Hi, I'm Medtech Chenka, representing the company, and I'm investigating a serious public health incident. Can you open up, please?
It's a robot. It can't be murdered. And yet, here we are.
Detonation in 40.
It's a fine line between control and coercion.
If we can just track down Lish 2's.
Lish 2's is classified.
2's? What do they want with her?
We're looking for someone called Ander Poole.
Please just stay away.
Human crew members serving aboard Sandminer Storm Mine 4. Uvanov, Dask, Chubb, Toos, Poole, Keril, Borg, Zilda, and Cass.
These are images of pilot Lish 2's and Commander Kai Uvanov. Do you recognize either of them? Liv went traveling and came back inquisitive.
Detonation in 20.
I don't know what's on the other side of this door, but whatever it is, it feels bad.
Would you like to call for backup?
What backup? We're on our own here. Okay, deep breath.
Detonation in 10.
On one side, you've got the company. On the other, the Sons of Kaldor. On the third side, you'll find the truth.
Big Finish. We love stories.
How much time are you working with stuff that's coming out now? You seem to be working from years ago to some stuff that comes out within months. Is your brain just constantly trying to deal with where am I at the moment?
Not really. I mean, because I'm always aware of what I'm supposed to be doing next in theory, but then that will change. And I think they're always very aware of, like me and Matt and other people who write as much as we do, of being aware of what we've got and when they need to have us do something, and it can vary. So the storyline I finished last week was for something we had an initial meeting about in January 2019, and that's not to suggest that it was planned to be written now, but obviously with things like COVID and other things getting in the way and other scripts which became the focus, this sort of gets mixed up and mixed and matched a bit. I mean, I seem to remember something like, say, the Missy box set. I think Lisa and probably Gemma, no, maybe Lisa and Roy, definitely a couple of people have written their scripts at least about a year before I wrote mine for Missy 2, just due to schedules getting mixed around and then them writing theirs early on the basis of people's availability, and then that availability changing, so everyone else getting put on the back burner, and all kind of moving around like that. There's all manner of weird cogs and wheels turning around each other. What was the one that made me think of one recently? Was it another one where the timings are a bit weird? Yeah, there's I can't remember. There's at least another one recently where the actual process is so convoluted and long, you wouldn't believe. But then others where it's just quick. But it is genuinely just like a question of juggling us around and going, right, what do I need to be doing now? I'll do that one now. And sometimes that drops out and is shifted in, and it never feels too problematic because obviously you're just writing one at a time.
The David Tennant stuff that's coming out at the moment, has that just been because of COVID? Suddenly he's available. Are people just able to just write scripts fast, or was more of that planned long ago?
Well, I think some of them, it's fairly obvious, kind of, he became available quite quickly, but then obviously some things were slightly more advanced in the planning than other things. Yeah, it's kind of hard to say, as I say, because sometimes you're taking advantage of circumstances and trying to pull something together quite quickly. And then other times you just have a long gap to be able to develop things. And this is the thing that's kind of weird and frustrating with it, is that the time has no relationship with the quality of the eventual product. There's at least one where it went from brief to completed script ready to record in less than a fortnight, where it's genuinely aggrieving to me, where I kind of go, well, that one's really good. Why is it taking me 3 months to write this? And at least part of that is because if you are given 3 months to write something, say, or to come up with a plot, you'll take all 3 months. Whereas if you're given a week, you'll just make decisions quicker. You'll go, well, what is this going to... And you suddenly, like, focus in on it and zoom in on it, and it becomes, whatever the choice is, that's the choice. And then both creative processes work. So, and it's always something I find kind of really baffling, but the amount of time you spend on it kind of doesn't matter. In a weird way, it all feels like it's about the same quality eventually. Quality varies according to other circumstances because it isn't really a science, but the amount of prep time really kind of doesn't seem to make much difference to me, certainly.
Your most highly recognised, awarded script is probably Absent Friends. How did that come about?
That was just... I remember, I think we were discussing during the second box set recording, maybe, of Doom Coalition, that I think Dave was saying, that he wanted to do a story which was Helen coming back and finding her grown-up brother and the problems from that. And that was roughly what it was. And I remember thinking, even during having the chat with David in the interview room, I was going, I really hope I write that one. That sounds up my street. And as I've talked about at various points before, my dad died in, I think it was, it's forgetting the years now, probably 2015, I feel. No, it's maybe longer than that. Okay, maybe 2014. And and I felt very aware that I was going to write something about it eventually. I thought this is going to inform something I write at some point. And I can't even remember what episode. I think I was driving down to Tunbridge Wells for a Tom Baker recording. I was listening to a Jago and Lightfoot. I think it was one by James Goss. And every now and then my brain just ticking over other things. And I had this thought in my head of just going, phone calls from the dead. Phone calls from people who've died. And just went, okay, that's the one about my dad then, is it? Okay, fair enough. And then I just went with that. Again, it's an interesting one in terms of what I say about the procedure. I think I seem to remember that I ended up writing it quite early, or writing the synopsis months before writing the script. And then the rest of Doom Coalition kind of being about like a month before recording, but like the actual storylining was maybe about 6 months before, where I'd written the storyline and then didn't write the actual script until at least 3 or 4 months later, which is rare. But again, that's just due to the schedules switching and changing and what we needed to do at the time. Yeah, and I was always aware from the get-go what the scene the key scene in it for me was the second phone call Liv has with her dad, which was the one I was kind of building to. I remember even during the notes that David and Ken were saying, she's a bit grumpy in this first phone call. We should probably take the opportunity to have her show a bit of affection. And I was going, no. That's the second call. That's the one thing I really can't change, because it has. The first one is she's dismissive. Second one is where she breaks your heart, and that was the theory behind that. It's weird. It's one of the things that, in terms of when people talk about ones you like as a writer, it bears so little relation to the eventual finished product, because that was a tough one to write, not for the reasons of it being emotional particularly, but there were aspects of the synopsis where the structure didn't work, and I wrote scenes and then had to go, no, that's just not good. No, that's not good. And restructured it and changed the threads through for some of the characters. It was stuff about the Doctor and the antique shop guy in the beginning, where how they met didn't quite work, how everyone was set off on their threads didn't quite work. And then there are other bits like the scene with Helen and her brother, just the argument happened too quickly and didn't have quite the right rhythms. It's a very weird scene, that scene, in fact, actually, because usually I always have people are doing something and they're doing something and going somewhere, or they've got an aim and a purpose, and that scene is about the two of them just having a conversation that has to get from point A to point B as naturally as possible and in the right rhythm, the correct rhythm. And I just struggle with that. Because I go, what are they talking about? What are they talking about that can get them from this point to this point? They're not discussing anything plotty. There's nothing about the plot happening. They are just talking about their own individual experiences and the tensions building between them. So I think, if I remember rightly, on the first pass, I went through that and largely left that as a placeholder, going, that's not right. I'm going to come back to that and finish that later, because I was just stuck on it. So it's not a story... In a weird way, it's not a story I have particular affection for the writing process of it. I am aware that it's one that works and that people like. I can never quite unhear the cogs going. That's the weird thing with that one. But obviously it's one that people love, and it's one that I have a huge amount of personal affection for, on the basis of it's the play about my dad. Or it's one of the plays about my dad. I ended up realising, I think a few months later, I wrote 529. So as I say, with Absent Friends, I went in going, yeah, this is about my dad. 529 is the one I got about halfway through and went, oh, this is about my dad too, isn't it? The first one is nominally about the loss of people, and then 529 is about coping with terminal disease. And then I think the final part of the trilogy is the invention of death. They all kind of form a little nominal trilogy of me being obsessed with death and all manner of things like that. And I think it probably drains into other things at different points here, there, and everywhere, because it's bound to. But that's some of the process of that one.
It is time to complete my masterpiece. Time to start the countdown. Until Doomsday. Coming soon from Big Finish Productions. Doctor Who, Doom Coalition 3.
The archives were the most highly secured place on Gallifrey. Probably even more so now after what happened last time.
What happened last time?
The 11 happened.
Threads in the web of time are being unpicked by whatever this is. They're in flux, but only in relation to one another.
Hear that fizzing noise? That's my brain.
Ah, don't worry, Liv. I have a seventh sense for this kind of business.
In the name of King Henry, I demand that you identify yourselves.
Intent hostile. Threat will be neutralized. None will stand in our way.
I'm Ruth, Helen's daughter.
Her daughter? Superville Com.
Superville? Well, that hardly sounds like an evil organisation.
What the devil?
A devil? Not today, Thomas. Today I'm your guardian angel.
I am the clocksmith. I am an artist, and I am everywhere.
Time Lords. Honestly, you spend your whole life believing there's only one left, then they start turning up like buses.
Big Finish. We love stories.
I've never seen it, but this must be what happens. What happens when? When he regenerates.
Do you feel other parts of your life have informed scripts as strongly as those have?
Oh yeah. I mean, you're not writing in a vacuum. You're writing from your own influences and your own contacts. I think the other one that reminds me, that feels quite heavily about that, was probably The Crooked Man, because I kind of got obsessed by this idea about how, or the degree to which me personally, but then I think probably everyone does, kind of fictionalizes their own lives. Because, I'd have slightly sort of failed relationships and be thinking, okay, well, what would the good plot twist would be that this then happens. Because I've had this failed one, it's now going to be the plot. The plot is basically that this happens next and I have this lovely time. Or career stuff where you go, oh, I've not been having a good time, but I will win this because that would be a good plot twist. And you forget that, life doesn't behave like films. And I think we get used to that. I think we see life reflected so much through fiction that you forget that fiction isn't reality. Fiction is a structured reality, and in fact, reality is nothing like fiction if we're being absolutely honest. And that came through to me very strongly in something like The Crooked Man, which was entirely about that, about aiming for something that's in relationship terms, aiming for something that's real rather than some sort of vaguely imagined rom-com based relationship drama. I don't know, but there are probably others here, there, and everywhere that where it's been influenced, and then other times when I just kind of go, I'm just going to have fun and write a farce. So because that's actually genuinely, I say that flippantly. I was acting in a play called Hysteria, which is at least partially a farce, and I don't think it's a coincidence that I plotted and wrote My Dinner with Andrew and False Negative at that time, which are both basically both farces. To varying degrees. So yeah, that's the other thing. That's where some of the other influences come. It's what you're reading, what you've seen at the cinema recently, things like that. All of these other influences feed in to what you happen to be doing at any given point.
Do you deliberately try and set out to be very different? Say this script's going to be, Absent Friends is very emotional. I mean, I think while it's successful, touched lots of our lives and did death really well. But then, as I say before, you came on with the Missy box one set, the betrothed, beheaded, regenerated, which is just hilarious.
Yes, it's fun.
Do you just decide, I'm just going to have fun with this one? This one's going to be emotional.
Yeah, I mean, there's a degree to which I like to give myself a brief. So if I don't have a brief, then I just go, well, what can I do with that? What can I do? But then, and obviously sometimes it's responding to the brief as well. So I think the idea of, you've got Missy and the monk, you can't do that too emotionally, really. That's bound to be kind of a few jokes. And I think it's just figuring out what something has to be and leaning into it, really. I do like to try and mix things up a bit. If the brief is completely wild, every now and then I'll just go, I haven't done one that's a scary one for a while. That was something like, say, The Red Lady in an iteration of mine, but I haven't done a scary one for a while. I think the Paul McGann one was, the Red Lady was going, I don't think Paul's had many scary ones. Let's do a scary one. So it can be as arbitrary as that. And then sometimes it is, I haven't written a comedy in a while, let's have a go at that just for the fun of it, or things like that. But mainly it's just responding to whatever the brief is. And then also sometimes it will be responding to whatever the story is as well, because sometimes the stories are quite serious and they'll veer one way in the writing just by virtue of you want to tell that story as honestly as possible. And then other times they'll just be something different because of what they are. I mean, I think... yeah, and it can lead to this slightly weird thing where there's sometimes a disconnect between the story and the script. So there's at least one which, as I say, for reasons I tend not to say about which ones I'm less keen on, but there's one where I remember going, really love the storyline. Somehow I didn't connect with the script. For whatever reason, I'm writing it, I'm going, yeah, this isn't for me. This isn't the one that's working for me. But a lot of the time, yeah, it's just... there is a degree to which I try and mix it up a bit, at least to keep myself interested as well. There's sometimes where... every now and then you can probably see I've just gone, I'll do something a bit structurally mad just for the sake of it, just to kind of have a bit of fun. So I wrote one earlier this year which was only just recorded, which was a bit like Vantage Point, which is a not terribly good film, but one of those sort of films where it's got and we see different perspectives. So it follows one person's story for 15 minutes, then another's for 15, and so on, which I was always been keen to do. And then other times it's just and this will be written as the menu of a formal meal. All these things just to try and mix it up a bit and just try to make sure I'm doing something different. And then every now and then you'll just go, and I've done that now, so I can just do something relatively standard that's just hopefully well told. Okay, one of the most recent ones to come out, been released, is Palindrome in the Time War 4 series. Now, once again, no spoilers, don't give things away, but by issue of the actual name, it's a palindrome. So the story works both backwards and forwards. Yes, kind of, yeah. Yeah, it's not. I think somebody was assuming it might be a bit flip-floppy, where you're going, you could listen to disc in either way, going, no, you can't. I don't think that would work any way at all. It might do. I've not tried it. You never know.
No, it wouldn't work. But in terms of plotting that, and I mean, how did you come up with the idea of doing a story backwards and forwards and so interconnected?
Well, I've always been quite tempted by the idea of one backwards. I think the initial pitch for A Life in the Day, actually, or the story that became A Life in the Day, was going to be backwards. But I think everyone thought it would be a bit too confusing at the time before people got a bit more ambitious. And that's at least largely due to it's a relatively common theatrical format. So it's something like the play Betrayal by Harold Pinter, or Merrily We Roll Along. Both as an initial play and the eventual musical version of it, where structurally it's an interesting thing, and I quite like playing with structure and seeing what can be done with it. And I feel that there's a certain degree which every now and then you want to do something a little bit crazy with a Time War story. So I think that was the inspiration. I think it was just thinking, could you tell a story like a palindrome? Would that be fun? I quite like the idea of, and again, this might be a tiny bit spoilerific, but the goodies becoming bad guys and then attacking the good guys who they were, that kind of thing. It was all sort of feeding in, going, that feels like something a little bit temporarily trying to... I mean, the irony being that this story actually technically doesn't take place in the Time War at all. It takes place between two different Time Wars. But yeah, that was the initial starting point for me. And then it was just writing a lot of numbers on a pad and then figuring out how it all played together. And in a way, there's a weird way where something like that, I know people say kind of, did you have to write a map or kind of figure it out? If anything, it's an easier structure in a way. Because it forces you to do... If you've got absolutely all the choices in the world, it's a bit harder to come up with something than when something's limited. If something's limited, you go, well, how does this work? How can this possibly work? There is one way of making this work, and we have to do this. And it leads you through it. So as I say, something like the menu in My Dinner with Andrew, that very much helped me out in the structure. It goes, well, I know what has to happen now. It has to be something that links to this, and then this bit, and then this bit, and then this bit, and all kind of fitting together in that way. It helps you through it. And so I found that, if anything, as I say, the structure of Palindrome wasn't that much harder than like a regular one to do, because once you've set up the structure, then you go, well, I now have to match this bit to this bit and bounce it around a bit as much as possible.
Yeah. Do you teach writing? Because you obviously have a lot of ideas about writing.
No, I try to encourage people whenever possible. I've not got around to. I think I've lectured at some places at some point. I've been invited in as a guest lecturer. But I'll certainly email people and discuss it with people wherever possible. I meet friends who are keen on writing. Go, here's some things to do. I've always said my two big tips always sound inane, but they're good. My big tip number one is start writing it, because everyone's got loads of ideas, but until you actually start writing it, it's not going to turn into anything. And the blank page is terrifying. Beat that. And the other piece of advice is end it. Get to the end. Write all the way through till you've got to the end and finish it. Because we've all got unfinished things, we've got halfway through, but you can't do anything with it until you've got to the end. You can, and also don't focus on that first damn page over and over again, getting it right. Just get to the end and then get it all right. And it's not least because one of the things people forget when they start out writing is everything you've ever enjoyed scripting, seeing as a script or as a book or as whatever, has had loads of people work on it. It's had several drafts. Your first draft shouldn't be matching them. Or if it is, you're a genius, and you will not need any of my help. But you'll probably don't judge what you've done as a first bash against Hemingway, for crying out loud. You can take time to work this up. That's the thing. Those are my bits of advice, really.
I call it the F word when I've tried to write things. I have a problem with the F word finishing.
Yeah, finishing is such a vital part. Just get to the end. Keep doing it until you get to the end, and then go back and fix it. And as Neil Gaiman says, that becomes the job of making it look like you knew what you were doing all along.
So, what are you looking forward to in the future? I know you can't tell us much, but what's the future hold?
I'm hopefully getting back on tour again next year. Quite looking forward to doing that. That would be fun. And then just other projects. There have been various other things outside Big Finish and for other companies that could be quite good fun to do if they come through. Yeah, just some more of my own stuff a bit every now and then. That'd be fun. And just hopefully working through with new writers. I'm just also excited for people to hear the stuff we've been doing. There's so many scripts I've done where I just go, I really want people to hear this now. Please, can you hear this now? And you're going, but got to wait till next year. There's a specific cliffhanger, for example, where I can already imagine the reaction, and that's to a big enough degree where I'm pretty certain. Where now I've said that, when people hear it, they go, "Oh yeah, that's that cliffhanger. That'll be that one then," because it's that ridiculous and obscene, really. But yeah, there's some fun stuff I've got coming up to write. A couple of stories. That's the thing. I'm always excited about writing the next one. Whatever the next one is, it's always going to be fun. I've written 2 storylines that I need to hear back from people on, and then a couple of others to plot. And yeah, we'll just see how they go. Really, I'm quite looking forward to I'm also looking forward to seeing people. That'd be nice. Seeing some of the gang. I've seen them down the line, but I haven't gone for a pint with Fitton in months, and that's a shame. And for other people like that, it's always half the joy of doing the Big Finish stuff is just hanging out with my friends occasionally, which I haven't had as much of a chance to do, sadly.
And you said you've got your own podcast too, so tell us about that.
Oh, my podcast, yeah, it's the Best Pick podcast, where me and my friends Tom and Jess, that's Tom Selinsky, who's written a few Big Finishes with Robert Kahn, and Jessica Regan, who has been in a few, actually. She's in a Star Cops, she's in Countermeasures. We are watching all of the films that won Best Picture at the Oscars, which is I think about 93 of them in total, or will be next year. And we've currently done, I think it's 72. And that means that having already seen some of the ones we haven't watched yet as a team, I am now down to my last, I think it's 4 at the moment. No, the next one we watch takes me down to 3. The next one is Mutiny on the Bounty, which I haven't seen. And after that, I've got 3 left to go. I only have to see Mrs. Miniver, Marty, and You Can't Take It With You. That's the only ones I've got left on my list. We did Godfather 2 yesterday. That was amazing. Yeah.
Like I said, you talk about whether or not they were worth winning in retrospect.
Oh yeah, that comes up. That we always say, did the Academy get it right? And to be fair, given we're massive Oscar fans, it's surprising how often we say no. Because a lot of the time they suck. They really do. There are a few utterly. This is the thing. It's genuinely, I think, impossible to have seen all of them unless you are specifically intending to. Because some of them you're just going to switch off halfway through. if you can get through Going My Way and the Broadway Melody without having decided that you are going to watch every damn minute of these, you're a better person than I am. Now, having said that, I probably would get through them because I'm just too much of a sticker. But they're not all very. There are some brilliant ones, and some brilliant ones which are just obscure for no good reasons. I mean, if you haven't seen Wings or The Best Years of Our Lives, you're missing out. There are some that nobody's seen, deservedly, and there are some that quite a few people have seen, which they overrate incredibly. So, The Deer Hunter's bollocks. Things like that. So, yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to ask, Dwayne?
No. What we like to do on the Sirens of Audio is recommend something that we've been listening to. It doesn't have to be Big Finish related or Doctor Who related. Or audio drama related, but is there anything that you've been listening to lately that you could recommend someone go out and have a listen to as well?
You know what? Yeah, I there's a really interesting podcast called The Rule of Three, which is by a couple of people who actually script edited me once, who I haven't seen terribly much of in recent years, but they then beat us to an award at the British Podcast Awards. They kind of won the Best Arts and Culture pod. Whereas we were the Bronze Award. And it's basically where they're two comedy script editors and script writers who are talking to comedians and comedy writers about something that they find funny, and then they're analysing it. Because they joke about how, people say you can't analyse comedy, but you absolutely can. That's genuinely really interesting in terms of the discussion of how comedy works and what people find funny and why it works.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes.
And your podcast too.
Yes, and mine as well. But I don't listen to mine.
Listen, thank you so much for your time, John. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate how much time you've given us, and just fascinating. And certainly, if anyone interested in writing, there's been so many amazing tips along there.
I hope that's useful to him. Yeah,
it's just brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I should probably go and have lunch because my girlfriend's probably wondering where the hell I am now. So.
Rule of Three, a podcast presented by me, Joel Morris.
And me, Jason Hazley.
In which we talk to people who make comedy.
About the films,
and TV,
and books,
and records,
and comics,
and people
that make them laugh.
She doesn't want people having a go at Martin, even though she can. And that's true. I mean, most of my friends are idiots, but they're my friends.
I never really understood what Han Solo did for a job.
You don't need to know anything more than, he's just sobbing while being punched in the balls.
They were just trying to make each other laugh in the office. You have to show a certain amount of contempt for your audience.
Write your own jokes, Pinamore, you lazy bastard.
Follow us on Twitter at Rule of Three Pod.
Rule of Three.
Available now from all good podcastier.
Well, there we go. Pretty amazing time with John. I think he would have kept talking if we'd allowed him. It's actually well past his lunchtime over there. But he's given us lots of time and lots of things to think about. So we like finishing up with a few recommendations from us as well. So, Dwayne, what have you been listening to?
Well, a week or so back, maybe a week and a half ago, maybe a week and a half, my Big Finish listening app, which I'm a big fan of on my Android device, broke because I'm a beta tester. So the new version had some glitch with it. Took a couple of days to get fixed. So in that time, I couldn't listen to any Big Finish. So rather than feel like I had my throat cut, I had some audiobooks that I wanted to get through, and one that I couldn't stop listening once I started. It was fascinating. It was by Michael Troughton, and I think it's just called Patrick Troughton. It's the biography of his dad, and talks about Patrick Troughton's life from his son's perspective, the kind of life that he led. They were very surprised about some of the personal details of Patrick Troughton's life. I had absolutely no idea. And there's quotes throughout the book, and Michael does an amazing impersonation of his dad. If they had to recast for Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines couldn't do it, Michael Troughton would be the way to go. Absolutely. I can't imagine David Troughton doing it. He's got a slightly different voice, but Michael has his dad's voice down pat. It's amazing. And it's a great book to listen to. I just got it off Audible. So I recommend Patrick Troughton by Michael Troughton.
I'd like to listen to that. I mean, Patrick certainly had an amazing life. and avant-garde life in some ways. And I don't know the only reason why he took the role of the Doctor was because he needed the regular work because he was supporting 2 different families.
Yeah.
And so he just managed
I had no idea about that.
It was a lot more common in those days. My grandfather had a wife, and my father and his wife, but he also had 2 other families. So he used to go around and spend 2 or 3 days with each family, and that's how they lived. He'd go for different families for different days, and bizarre, but that's what they did.
Very good. What about you, Philip? What have you got for us?
Well, I'm going to recommend a podcast. So one of my other passions is musical theatre. And there's a great Australian podcast called Every Musical Ever, which comes out once a week. It's towards the end of their 2nd season at the moment. There was just an episode I listened to today on a Vita. But if you're into musicals, he gets the guy who runs the podcast directs musicals for particularly Hayes Theatre and other places. But he gets different performers on to come and talk to him about shows they've been in and things they've done. It's always very fascinating. And I love listening to what shows are being talked about. I usually listen to the soundtrack at the same time. And so my listening this week will be Evita, based on that podcast.
Excellent. Thanks for that recommendation. Now, I've remembered something this time, Philip. You're not going to believe this, but I've remembered to suggest that anyone listening to us give us some feedback. You can do that by leaving us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. And you can contact us with nice emails only, please. That's my only stipulation. All the nasty ones will come flooding in now. sirensofaudio@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Twitter at Audio Sirens. And we're also on Facebook. Just do a little search for us. Oh, a website too, sirensofaudio.com. You can get all the episodes there too.
We'd love to hear from you. And feel free to rate and review us on whatever podcast system you're using, because we'd love to get some ratings as well.
Thanks, Philip. Looking forward to catching up with you next time. We've got some good shows lined up. So, with that in mind, dear listener, keep listening to lots of lovely audio. And I said at the start of this episode with John Dorney that I'd been visiting an animal farm this morning. I've got a bit of hay fever. Forget that. All right, we'll catch you next time on the Sirens of Audio. No, I lost it. It was better in my head. It was better in my head. It wasn't sounding good coming out.